Hello everyone, this is Rick, and today in the episode 14 of the Gupta Empire series, we are going to discuss social conditions in the Gupta period. So, without doing any delay, let's start. Introduction to social conditions. The Gupta period 320 to 550 CE is known for its significant cultural and intellectual advancements, often called the Golden Age of India. Hinduism dominated, although Buddhism and Jainism still existed. The caste system, Varna, was strictly observed, with Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras each assigned specific roles. Brahmins were privileged, handling religious duties, education, and advising kings. Significant texts like the Manusmriti guided the social norms, particularly concerning caste and religious practices. The Gupta's promotion of Hindu culture led to the construction of temples and patronage of scholars, further entrenching the caste system in daily life. Caste system and Brahmanical dominance. The caste system was highly rigid during the Gupta period, with major four varnas. Brahmins enjoyed numerous privileges like exemption from taxes and physical punishment. Kshatriyas, especially royal families, held political and military power, ruling over territories. Vaishyas were involved in trade, agriculture, and artisanal work, contributing to the economy. Shudras performed menial tasks and served the upper castes. Kings like Chandragupta II and Kumaragupta I gave land grants agrahara to Brahmins, cementing their religious and political influence. Brahmins conducted rituals and maintained control over Vedic education, further legitimizing their dominant social status. Position of women in the Gupta society. Women's position in society was governed by Dharmashastra and Manusmriti texts. Education for women was rare, though they played important roles in households. Practices like sati, self immolation of widows, were common, although widow remarriage was allowed under certain circumstances. Women could not inherit property independently, though they had limited rights over household affairs. Notable exceptions include Prabhavati Gupta, daughter of Chandragupta II, who ruled as a regent. Widows could perform austerities or religious duties but had no significant role in public life. The Gupta period also saw the continuation of Niyoga practice, where childless widows could remarry to bear children. Marriage and family life. Marriage was central to Gupta society, often following the guidelines of Manusmriti and Vatsayana's Kama Sutra. Patriarchal family structures dominated, with men as the heads of joint families. Women were married young, and arranged marriages were standard practice. Polygamy was practiced particularly among royalty and higher castes for political alliances. Dowry was an important element, and marriages were considered sacrosanct, aimed at maintaining caste priority. The Niyoga system allowed a widow to marry her brother in law if childless to continue the family line. Vatsayana's Kama Sutra also described Gandharva, love marriage, and other forms of marriage recognized in the Gupta society. Dress and ornaments. Clothing varied by social status. Cotton garments for commoners and silk for brocade or for the elite. Men typically wore dhotis with an upper garment, while women wore saris and bodices. Headwear was common among elites, with decorated headdresses worn on auspicious occasions. Ornaments, including gold and pearl necklaces, earrings, and armlets, were widely used by both men and women. Buddhist monks wore red garments, while Jain monks dressed in white, reflecting their religious affiliations. Women also adorned themselves with nose rings, anklets, and painted their bodies with pastes and perfumes. The use of false hair and intricate braids was fashionable among elite women, as seen in Ajanta paintings. Food and dietary habits. The diet during the Gupta period was primarily vegetarian, especially among Brahmins and Vaishyas. Common foods include rice, wheat, barley, and lentils, along with clarified butter and oils. Non vegetarian food was consumed in moderation, mostly by the Kshatriyas and lower classes. Alcohol was generally frowned upon, though it was consumed by some in royal circles. Betel leaf chewing after meals was a widespread practice for refreshing the mouth. Meat eating became less common to the rise of Bhakti and Mahayana Buddhism. Meals were typically elaborate, especially for the elite, with multiple courses served in palatial feasts. Entertainment and recreation. Indoor games like chess and dice were popular pastimes among both adults and children. Physical sports, including wrestling, archery, and chariot races, were common among the warrior class. Hunting was a favorite leisure activity for the nobility along with cockfights. Cultural performances like music, dance, and drama were held in royal courts and temples. Vatsayana's Kama Sutra and Kalidasa's works reference public festivities and art forms enjoyed during this period. The festival of Rath Yatra was celebrated, emphasizing the importance of religious festivals. Fairs and public gatherings were common, bringing together people from various regions. Education and learning. Education was highly valued, with the Vedas forming the foundation of learning for upper caste males. Gurukuls and Buddhist monasteries like Nalanda were key centers of learning. Brahmins were the main educators, teaching religious texts, mathematics, and philosophy. Women were generally excluded from formal education, except for a few notable exceptions. Buddhist texts like the Lalita Vistara and works of scholars like Aryabhatta emerged during this period. Sanskrit became the language of literature and administration, promoting scholarly works. The period also saw the rise of Nalanda and Takshila as international centers of higher education. Religion and rituals. Hinduism was dominant religion, but Buddhism and Jainism were still practiced. Religious rituals included elaborate yajnas, fire sacrifices, performed by kings and priests. Gupta kings, especially Chandragupta II and Kumaragupta, were devout Hindus, promoting Vaishnavism. Temples were built across the empire, and deities like Vishnu, Shiva, and Devi were widely worshipped. Vedic rituals, including the Upanayana sacred thread ceremony, were performed by the Brahmins. The Bhakti movement, emphasizing personal devotion to a deity, began to gain prominence. Religious festivals like the Rath Yatra were celebrated with grandeur across the empire. Social hierarchy and land distribution. The Gupta period saw a feudal structure emerging, with land distributed based on caste and occupation. Brahmins and Kshatriyas owned most of the land, benefiting from land grants, agrahara. Local lords, samantas, controlled smaller territories, collecting taxes and managing villages. Shudras and untouchables had no land rights, performing manual labor and living in rural areas. The administrative system allowed for local governance with village councils, panchayats managing daily affairs. The king was the supreme authority, but much of the power was decentralized to feudal lords. This hierarchical structure solidified Gupta divisions based on caste. Art and architecture. The Gupta period is known for its advancements in art and architecture, particularly in sculpture and temple design. Notable examples include the Ajanta caves, which depict lifelike figures of gods and commoners. Temples dedicated to Vishnu and Shiva were constructed using intricate stone carvings. The period saw a blend of religious and secular art with sculptures of deities and royal figures. Kalidas's works also influenced visual art, with his play Sakuntala depicted in carvings and paintings. Artists from this period excelled in portraying human emotions as seen in Ajanta murals. Gupta art was a reflection of the cultural and religious life of the time. Court life and administration. Gupta kings ruled through a combination of military power and religious legitimacy. The royal court was the center of cultural, political, and intellectual life. Ministers, scholars, and diplomats gathered to advise the king on matters of state. Political alliances were often cemented through marriage and religious patronage. Chandragupta II's reign marked the peak in administrative efficiency with a well organized bureaucracy. Land revenue, trade, and agriculture formed the economic backbone of the empire. The king held absolute power but delegated authority to local governors and military commanders. Position of slaves and laborers. Slavery existed in the Gupta period, though it was not widespread. Slaves were employed in royal households and temples, performing menial tasks. Laborers, particularly the Shudras, worked as farm hands, artisans, and manual workers. The lower castes, including the untouchables, Chandalas, were segregated from the society. The Manusmriti provided guidelines on the treatment of slaves, forbidding their mistreatment. Laborers had limited rights and were excluded from land ownership. Many Shudras were employed in construction, particularly in building temples and palaces. Legacy of the Gupta period. The Gupta period left a lasting legacy on Indian social, cultural, and religious life. The rigid caste system became deeply entrenched in the Indian society, influencing future generations. Brahmins solidified their religious and social dominance, shaping educational and legal frameworks. The era's contributions to art, architecture, literature, and science, such as the works of Kalidas and Aryabhata, in continue to be celebrated. The rise of feudalism and land grant system led to socio-economic changes influencing medieval Indian governance. The blending of Hindu practices with remaining Buddhist and Jain traditions enriched the religious landscape. Social norms established during the Gupta period remained influential well into later periods of Indian history, laying the groundwork for structure of future kingdoms. So that was all about the social condition during the Gupta period. Hope you have liked the video, and with your support I wish to grow in future. Thank you for your love and support.